You're about to listen to an early episode of the podcast back when it was called Let's Talk About Stress. In this one, Phil Stanley shares his personal experiences with work-related stress. And whilst he doesn't talk about burnout specifically, I think that there are many parallels to be drawn and lessons to be learned from his experience. So I hope you enjoy it. It's nearly 10 years since my burnout experience, and I believe that it wasn't necessary for me to burn out, and it's not necessary for you either. In this podcast, my guests and I share our real-life experiences with burnout. We get into the science of stress and share actionable tips on how to prevent burnout and how to recover from it. I'm Hannah Holden, ex-management consultant and burnout survivor. I work with management consultants to help them avoid and overcome burnout. I help them to get intentional about their choices, rebuild their energy, and embed new healthy habits so that they can get back to loving life. Hello, so welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk About Stress. And today I have with me Phil Stanley, who is from Come On Coaching. He helps high-performing men in their 40s get healthy, happy, and excited about life, both at home and work. And so thank you for joining me, Phil. Welcome.
Good morning, Hannah. Nice to see you. How are you doing?
Yeah, really, really good. It's chilly. It's very chilly here, but it's all good. It's really nice to have some bright sunshine at last. So, Phil, we've only got a short episode, so I'm going to dive straight in and ask away. So the first
Great,
question,
let's do it.
The first question I wanted to ask you was, so you're now a coach, but it wasn't that long ago that you were a sales manager. And you've mentioned when we spoke before that you had a bit of a grueling schedule, which was only in part due to work. So I'd like you to start with describing what your average day used to look like.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, yeah, like you say, a lot of this grueling schedule was kind of self-imposed to a degree. So if we rewind maybe 18 months, let's say, a typical day for me would start very early in the morning. I mean, it wasn't out of the question to get up at 4 a.m., but certainly 5 a.m. if I was letting myself have a lie-in. So it'd be up, straight to the espresso machine in the kitchen, couple of espressos, out the door, maybe a 10K run, or maybe straight to the gym to lift some weights. And then it would really be coming home, getting ready to go out for a day's work, bits and pieces at home with the family, but really getting back, allowing myself just enough time to have a shower, get changed and rush out the door, do the school drop off or whatever it may be, and then hit the road essentially. And then the day could quite easily look like a 3 or 4 hour drive to the north of the country, for instance. I was a sales manager, but I was also on the road at the time as well as managing the team. I was actually the man on the ground to a vast degree. So yeah, it could be driving several hours to a location to go and meet some retailers, not eating anything, fueling myself on more caffeine, a couple of meetings, back in the car for a 3 or 4 hour drive home, trying to string it out, not eating anything, getting in, feeling tired, stressed, overwhelmed. I've been behind the wheel all day and I've got 55 emails that I've not checked, but I don't really want to spend the whole night on my laptop. But if I don't, then tomorrow's going to have 100 emails to check, that kind of like whole email inbox obsession that you can sometimes get in a sales role or any type of role, I guess. And then it would be getting, because I've not eaten all day, then it would be spend a lot of the night eating, raiding the cupboards and doing whatever I felt I sort of wanted to do to try and soothe myself, let's say, before falling asleep and rinse and repeat the next morning, pretty much. So in a nutshell, that was kind of where I was at.
Okay, so some of what you're describing sounds like the kind of thing that many people aspire to, like being able to get themselves out of bed at 5 o'clock in the morning and motivate themselves for a 10K run sounds like the kind of thing that many people aspire to. And externally, it sounds like, that you had it all, right? So you were getting up, you were fit, you were looking after yourself physically, although, I get you were saying you're not eating. But a lot of that sounds like something to aspire to. So what was going wrong? What symptoms were showing up in your life that were suggesting that you needed to make a change?
Yeah, I think the key thing, and like, I totally understand what you're saying. Some people might think, "Oh, I wish I could get out of bed at that time in the morning and do all this stuff that he's talking about." But I would say the key distinction for me is that it was not it was not being done from a place of acceptance and a place of I'm trying to better myself. Here's how I'm going to do it. I'm building on top of strong foundations here. This was really done from a much more destructive perspective. So it was like, I need to get out of bed this early because I I'm not good enough if I don't have this hardcore exercise routine in the morning. I need to. It was coming from quite a destructive place. So there was a lot of restriction, a lot of control measures put in place, which, whilst you could argue that there's like a health and fitness element to it, which, yeah, I'm quite a health and, quite a fit chap. Nonetheless, it all felt a bit destructive, and it was very much about how much can I get out of myself without putting anything into the tank. So, hardcore exercise, lots of high intensity, fueling myself on caffeine and not many calories, by choice during the day. People are advocates of intermittent fasting, which is something I used to swear by sort of a few decades ago, but that soon became for me quite an unhealthy tool. So I kind of pretended that I was intermittent fasting, but really what I was doing was starving myself all day and binge eating at night. So it was in a more in a healthier way with a slightly different perspective on it. Yes, maybe it could have been something that was there to better myself and build myself up, but it was really being done from a place of like, I can't accept the way that I am, so therefore I need to kind of destroy myself a little bit more, if that makes any sense. So the internal filter on it was one of destruct rather than build, and from a place of acceptance.
You were motivating yourself not through, like you say, not through a desire to better yourself, but more flagellation. You're not good enough. In order to be good enough, you need to get going.
I suppose the easiest way to put it in a nutshell would be it wasn't coming from a place of self-compassion and kindness. It was coming from a place of non-acceptance and lack of self-worth. Therefore I must do this, rather than hey, I'm already good enough and I just want to better myself and I'm going to take on this positive challenge. And so
that's how things were, and now things are different for you, and you've changed careers, and no doubt you've changed some of those other behaviours that you've just been describing. What led to the change? What was showing up for you that made you think, I'm not happy with how things are, I need to make some changes?
Yeah, I think really looking back, from a much better place now as we kind of go 18 months into the future, let's say, there's a lot of stuff that have been showing up for me for several years, if not decades, really, from my early 20s through to my 40s. But I suppose to put it in a bite-sized form, then I'd been resisting the fact that I wasn't really happy with where I was at in my life. Don't get me wrong, the job I was doing, great company, no real issues there, and I could have quite easily stayed in this sales manager, sort of senior management role, probably for the rest of my working career. The path to retirement was pretty much set without taking anything for granted. But I've been there 17 years. I was part of the furniture, essentially, well liked in the firm and within the industry. But something was eating away at me inside a little bit, and it was really the fact that I just I hadn't found my sense of purpose. I wasn't really getting the fulfillment that I wanted from the job. I was getting a decent salary and all these other kind of perks and all the rest of it. And like I say, life was by no means awful on the outside, I guess. But on the inside, I wasn't getting that sense of personal satisfaction. I felt that I was going to work with a bit of a mask on each day. Oh, I'm Phil, the sort of happy-go-lucky fireplace salesman kind of thing, And I got the blinkers on. My mindset was very much like, I've been here 17 years. What the hell would I do if I didn't have this job? And it was very much like, well, that's not an option for you, Phil. So just keep on doing what you're doing. And then I suppose really like the blinkers came off when I started working with my own coach. And over the course of 12 months and beyond, we really started unpacking a lot of things. And I realized that I was just holding myself back. A lot of limiting beliefs had set in. And really, I was able to see things from a different perspective and think, if this is what I want to do with my life, then I can choose to do something different. And, long story short, as things started to unravel, it led me to a position where I took the plunge basically and left that job to, start my business and do a complete 180 flip in my life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I'm going to go back to when we last spoke, because I think we touched on something that interested me. So when we last spoke, you had just listened to the first episode of this podcast where I described my experiences of burnout. And at the end of that episode, I encourage listeners to journal, just to write down anything that came up for them, anything that they're reflecting on in light of listening to my story, what resonates for people, and what reflections can you take away about your own life. And so you were you'd just been doing that. As a good listener, you had taken up your pen and paper and you had done what I'd suggested. And one of the things that you said resonated with you was this kind of addiction to the adrenaline of stress. And I certainly know, I felt like I was a high performer. So when I was in my probably late 20s, early 30s, I really performed on adrenaline. And I had some caffeine. I wasn't a huge caffeine drinker, but mostly it was adrenaline. And the more that I performed, the more, that my work was successful, and the more successful I was, the more I wanted to be successful. And so, yeah, I would wind myself up into this adrenaline fueled state. And that was something that you said resonated with you. And so I wanted to dip into that a bit. What did that look like for you?
Yeah, definitely. Everything you said kind of resonates with me as well. It was very much a case of I liked sort of the feeling of almost running on fumes and sort of being down in the, I mean, it's funny looking back on it, the language I was literally about to say was sort of being down in the trenches, in the sense that like I'm sort of in the thick of it, but almost like being a bit of a busy fool to an extent, feeling like I'm doing 100 things at once, but not really getting anything done. There was I'm doing this from a place of hindsight now, but bit of a lack of focus, I think. When you feel that you're busy because you've got 10 meetings on in the day, and then you're doing things in between, and you're pinging out emails left, right, and centre, and all these different things. But really, was I being productive? I don't think I particularly was. And I liked this kind of feeling of starting my day off with this intense burst of exercise, and then not really by not eating and drinking a lot of caffeine, and this kind of almost like edgy, slightly anxious kind of vibe was something I kind of liked. And whether I liked it or not, I think my body just got used to the adrenaline and the cortisol and everything sort of flowing through my bloodstream by the kind of lifestyle that I was choosing to a vast degree. Sort of became quite addictive. I quite liked that. I quite liked that whole feeling. But obviously what goes up must come down, right? So there's only a certain amount of time that you can run on fumes. And I wasn't putting enough into the tank. There was a lot more going out than was coming in. And, at some point that has to be addressed. Okay.
So, and did that show up for you physically? Did your body begin to not be able to cope with that? Or was it more that did you seek to make changes because you just recognized that this was not sustainable and not making you happy?
I think a bit of both, to be honest with you. I was getting, signs from my body and my mind kind of saying something isn't right here. My relationships are suffering a bit. At home, I wasn't showing up particularly as a great father, great partner, and being completely honest. Sort of stress, as you start the day, this kind of fueling off this sort of anxious adrenaline feeling by 6 o'clock at night when you come home from work, like that no longer feels so good. And I would cope with that by unhealthy and unhelpful eating habits, kind of a sort of fast all day, binge at night sort of mentality. But that was affecting my relationships, and really it came to the point where I felt like my physical health was suffering a little bit. I've become really obsessed with trying to lose body fat. At the time, body image is a very big thing to me. I've since been able to reframe my thoughts around body image and exercise, but at the time it was all about getting lean, losing fat, getting lean, looking good, became a bit of an obsession to the expense of relationships and my health to a degree. So there was a physical element, and also a mental element, just looking at yourself in the mirror and just sort of feeling like I just looked a bit stressed and I felt like conversations I was having with people at work, for instance, wasn't being my authentic self. I was just sort of playing the role of who I felt I should be at the time. And I really had to address that by ultimately improving my methods of self-care, coping mechanisms of not eating all day and then shoving loads of food into your gob at night weren't really working for me anymore. And I realised that this whole thing of like foot on the gas, keep it running in the red, 100 miles an hour, was going to lead me to a place that, it'd be extremely hard to come back from. So I had to employ some much better self-care techniques, essentially.
Okay. I feel
putting more into the tank,
Good. I feel like we need a bit of a happy ending here. So talk to us about how life is now. What are the big significant changes between what you just described for us and where you are now?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, there's 100% a happy ending here, because I feel like you have to go through all these, like everyone's got their own journey, right? Everyone's got their story. Had to go through all of this to become the person that I feel I am now. And so really, I massively stepped up everything around self-care, for my benefit, but also for the benefit of the people around me. So whilst I've always dabbled in meditation, for instance, I made meditation a daily, non-negotiable practice. And I'm not talking about sitting cross-legged for an hour at a time, sort of trying to transcend or anything like that. It was literally like, okay, I can commit to 10, maybe 15 minutes of meditation each day. Right, yes, that's definitely going to help me cultivate some awareness, get to grips with what's kind of going on in my body and listening to what's happening rather than trying to resist it all the time. And then, the self-care ritual, if you like, meditation, daily gratitude, something that became very important, just shining this light of positivity on all the good things that already exist in my life. That became, and still is, something really important to me. And then, like I touched on, reframing my relationship with food and exercise. Don't get me wrong, I still get up pretty early and I still love going to the gym, for instance. But now my focus is not on getting lean and looking a certain way. It's about mobility and health, so that as I progress through my 40s into my 50s and beyond, I've got a mobile, healthy body. I can maintain a good level of fitness. So just as an example, it's gone from aesthetics to mobility in terms of my exercise. And really, now I am building from a place of accepting, I know who I am, I know I'm worthy, I know I'm good enough, and therefore everything I'm doing it's been reframed in a way that it just feels more constructive and more positive. Things like, sorry, go on.
I was going to say, so now you work with men who are in a similar situation to where you were, and you've obviously got your own transformation story. Have you also managed to achieve transformations with your clients?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I've had some fantastic relationships that I've built with clients over the past, since sort of July this year, really, over the last few months. And it's been fantastic to see. So I've had people that have come to work with me because initially they're feeling quite stressed and anxious about things going on in their own lives. There's a feeling that they're sort of not showing up as the person they want to be. I've had a few people that have come to me because they've decided to address their own relationship with alcohol as well, which is an interesting one, because this is not outwardly facing. I don't market myself as an alcohol-free coach, or whilst alcohol is part of my messaging, if you like, because it's something I'm interested in talking about. I don't put myself out there as the alcohol-free coach or anything like that particularly. But I've got 3 people at the moment who've all decided they want to work with me and address their relationship with alcohol, which is another thing that feeds into stress, really, because they've all realised that drinking as a stress coping mechanism was really not serving them. And that's something I can relate to as well. So helping people on their own journeys to dial down the stress and just enjoy their lives more, essentially, learn healthy habits and have a better harmony between work and home, family, job, etc. Something I'm really passionate about.
I've been reading this fascinating book about the upside of stress, that it's not all bad. And one of the things that the book talks about is that stress is intrinsically linked to meaning in our lives. We only get stressed about something that means something to us, that is valuable to us for whatever reason. And when we try to numb ourselves to the stress, we also numb ourselves to the meaning. And we end up actually in a far worse place where we're denying ourselves meaning in our lives. And actually that has far worse health outcomes than mental health and physical health outcomes than it does if you say, you know what, I have a stressful job and I experience these experiences, or I have this stressful situation in my family, and you know, to acknowledge the stress, experience the stress, but also recognize the meaning that is underneath it, and that is far healthier. And so what you're talking about, you know, where you were saying that you used to binge eat and others used to numb themselves to whatever's stressing them out through alcohol, I can really see the similarities there. So whilst you were using a different substance to try and block away your experiences, I can see that they would resonate with the story that you've just told us, because it's that kind of numbing to the pain and to the stress and to the meaning.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I literally do kind of phrase it as, you know, what's your anesthetic of choice? Yeah. You know, and I totally agree with you. Like, the stress can get a bad rap because there's a lot of positive elements of stress, and it's quite essential to our survival, if you like. But yeah, I think it's not listening. I kind of think I see stress as signals, and sometimes, you know, warnings from your body, from your mind, and these are signals to be listened to. And I think it's when you depress them, you push them down, you push them away, you numb yourself to the signals. That's when it can become problematic. If you just treat these things as signals to be acted upon, then it can actually become, you know, quite a healthy, constructive thing in your life.
Yeah, definitely. And definitely if we can put, like you say, so some stress it should be treated as a signal and we recognize it and we make changes. Others will be, actually, let's recognize that the reason that we're so worried about, let's say it's about a child, is because we care about them so much and they are so meaningful to us. And if we look at the big picture, I wouldn't be in any other place. I wouldn't want to be a parent to a different child. I wouldn't want to be in a different situation because the child is so meaningful, you know? Like, getting that perspective, I think, helps. Whereas when we focus on what we can't control and we focus on all the negativity and we miss the big picture, that can really spiral. I'm trying to keep these around 20 minutes, so we're about that point. But I wanted to ask you if you have a tip or a recommendation for somebody. Let's say somebody's in a similar situation to what you had described, with this self-flagellation, and knowing that they're not entirely happy with how things are. Perhaps that's showing up with issues with relationships, whether that be with people or with substances, or both. Where would you suggest they start, and what might be a bite-sized something that's easy to action for them? Where could they start that doesn't feel like it's, you know, trying to eat the elephant? Like, where could they, what's a bite-sized tip that you could give to somebody who's in your situation?
Yeah, I mean, based on my own experiences, but also what I'm seeing being helpful to some of my clients, is we just want to slow everything down, get out of this red zone, and cultivate some awareness. So really, you know, as far as I'm concerned, the tool to do that and achieve that is meditation. And like we touched on earlier, it doesn't have to be anything like deeply spiritual or anything like that. You sort of say meditation, you don't want it to put some people off. I really start with my clients. Let's just start a 2-minute daily meditation practice. And if you don't want to call it meditation, just call it sitting down somewhere quiet, just being present with yourself, breathing, just being aware, and just having that time away from screens and internet and people and things that hijack you, and just have some quiet time. And if you don't want to call it meditation, that's fine, that doesn't matter. But essentially, start with a 2-minute habit that you can perform consistently and build up from there. And if you can meditate for 10 to 15 minutes a day, you know, I've got no doubt that it will bring some benefit into your life. But the reason we're doing it is to slow things down and cultivate awareness so that you can hear the messages that are coming from some of the stressful situations in your life. If you don't take the time out and you're always in the red zone, 100 miles an hour zone, foot to the gas, then it's very hard to listen to these messages because they're just bombarding you and making you want to go even faster. So my takeaway is develop a meditation practice that you can stick to.
That sounds that sounds amazing. I'm sure that for some people that sounds achievable. Hopefully, for those who think that meditation's big and scary, the idea of sitting for 2 minutes isn't quite so scary. I've actually got a couple of recordings of meditations which might be helpful, so I'll put the links in the show notes for those. Before we finish and say our farewells, if somebody wants to contact you or follow up with you, how do they find out more about what you do? How would they contact you?
I mean, the best way to reach me and get a flavour of what I'm all about is really to contact me via LinkedIn or via Instagram. So both of those are at Common Coaching. That's my kind of profile name, if you like, across the various platforms. Or people can drop me an email at hello@commoncoaching.co.uk. And yeah, I'm always happy to speak to people. I love connecting with people, and if anything I've said resonates with anyone, and they want to share their story with me, or just have a chat with me about how I might be able to help them, then my inbox is always open, as they say. So
Awesome.
Do feel free to reach out.
Okay, and we'll include all of your contact details in the show notes as well.
Thank you.
Those,
brilliant.
Those links to meditations. Perfect. Really nice to speak to you. Thank you for sharing and being an open book for us.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. And look forward to all the podcast episodes that you've got coming forth. And it's a great opportunity to speak on these subjects. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff. And the more that we talk, the more easier it will become for others to talk to. So great. Thank you so much.
Definitely. Thanks, Anna. Cheers.
Bye. These podcasts are here to help you manage your stress and burnout, and your feedback is really valuable. So please rate this podcast and also drop me a note with any questions, suggestions, or feedback that you might have. One of the most common questions I get asked is, where should I start? And I believe that the best place for you to start is to learn how to soothe your nervous system. I've created a free download with instructions for 5 different ways that you can do just this, and all of them work pretty much instantly. It's called the Essential Toolkit for Management Consultants. You can download it now at www.hannahholden.co.uk/essential. One last thing, it's the legal language. This podcast is presented solely for educational and entertainment purposes. It is not intended as a substitute for the advice of your doctor, psychotherapist, or other qualified professional.